Tobias Griffin was 36 years old and worked overnight maintaining critical systems for medical facilities around Seattle. To most people, he barely registered. The man with the aging pickup. The man who never talked about money. Lauren Griffin's co-workers believed she had married beneath her. They saw a quiet husband who wore the same brown work jacket for years and left expensive conversations to other people. What they didn't know was that Tobias had spent months collecting something far more valuable than status. The sentence landed just before dessert. "You're a good man, Tobias. You're just small." The laughter around the table faded. Tobias looked at Lauren, then at Cameron Hayes. Then his phone vibrated with a message he had been waiting 3 months to receive. And suddenly, dinner no longer mattered. Before we continue, let me know where you're watching from and what your local time is right now. I always enjoy seeing how far these stories travel. And if you like slow burn stories where patience matters more than revenge, make sure to subscribe. There's a lot more to this story than anyone at that dinner table realized. The rain had started just before sunset, not the dramatic kind, just a steady Seattle drizzle that turned the pavement dark and reflective. Tobias Griffin parked his 12-year-old Ford F-150 in the valet area outside Canlis and sat behind the wheel for a few seconds longer than necessary. The windshield wipers moved back and forth. Back and forth. The truck smelled faintly of coffee and machine oil. His work boots rested on a rubber floor mat stained from years of job sites. Inside the breast pocket of his brown jacket sat a folded note Lauren had left on the kitchen counter 3 days earlier. "Please don't embarrass me tonight." No explanation, no smiley face, just those 5 words. Tobias had read them exactly once, then folded the paper and put it away. Now he stepped out into the cold air and handed his keys to the valet. The young attendant glanced at the truck, then glanced toward the luxury vehicles lined up beside it. A black Range Rover, a silver Mercedes S-Class, a white Porsche Taycan. The attendant quickly hid the expression on his face. Tobias noticed anyway. He noticed everything. That habit had been built over years. The ability to observe quietly while everyone else talked. The ability to remember details that other people dismissed. Inside, Canlis warm lighting reflected against polished wood and glass. The restaurant overlooked Lake Union, where hundreds of tiny lights shimmered across the water. Lauren had reserved a private dining room, her promotion celebration, senior operations director, 1 step below executive level, the biggest achievement of her career. The room contained 12 people when Tobias entered. All of them wore tailored suits, designer watches, perfect smiles. The conversations paused briefly, then continued. Lauren stood near the window speaking with a tall man in a navy suit, Cameron Hayes. Even before Tobias reached them, he could see Cameron was comfortable occupying the center of attention. Some people entered rooms. Others acted like they owned them. Cameron belonged to the second category. "Hey," Tobias said. Lauren turned. Her smile appeared for a fraction of a second, then disappeared. "You're late." Tobias glanced at his watch. 7 o'clock exactly. "No, I'm on time." "Close enough." She adjusted the sleeve of her dress, an expensive black designer dress Tobias had never seen before. Probably new. Probably expensive. Probably purchased without mentioning it. The thought crossed his mind and then disappeared. He wasn't interested in arguing. Not tonight. Cameron extended a hand. "Tobias Griffin. Tobias. Lauren talks about you." Something about the way he said it felt rehearsed. Tobias shook his hand. Firm grip. Perfect smile. Cold eyes. Years of observing people had taught Tobias something. Most lies appeared long before the words arrived. Dinner began 20 minutes later. Wine flowed freely. Stories became louder. The executives discussed acquisitions, market growth, investment opportunities, and vacation properties. One man described buying a second home in Scottsdale. Another talked about a private golf club membership. A woman near the end of the table laughed about spending $12,000 remodeling a guest bathroom. The numbers floated around the room casually, as if everyone present lived in the same reality. Tobias listened. He rarely interrupted. When someone asked what he did for work, he answered simply, "I maintain infrastructure systems for healthcare facilities." The conversation immediately moved elsewhere. That happened often. People heard the word maintenance and stopped listening. Nobody asked what kind of infrastructure. Nobody asked who depended on it. Nobody asked how many hospital systems could fail if someone did the job poorly. The title sounded ordinary, so they assumed the person was ordinary too. Across the table, Lauren laughed at something Cameron said. A little too long, a little too eagerly. Tobias noticed. Again, not because he was jealous, because he paid attention. The appetizers arrived, then the main course, then another bottle of wine. As the evening continued, Cameron gradually became the dominant voice in the room. Everyone seemed drawn toward him, toward his stories, toward his confidence, toward the illusion of certainty. At one point, Cameron raised his glass. Lauren earned this promotion. Everyone applauded. Lauren smiled. Cameron continued. Honestly, she should have had it last year. More agreement. More laughter. Then he added casually, some people are simply built for bigger things. The comment drifted through the room, harmless on the surface, sharp underneath. Tobias saw Lauren smile again. That smile bothered him more than the words, because it looked familiar, not supportive, not grateful, validated, as if she had finally received approval from the people she wanted approval from. The conversation shifted toward marriage. One executive joked about how demanding corporate life could be. Someone asked Lauren how she balanced everything. Career, marriage, long hours, travel. Lauren swirled her wine, then laughed softly. Oh, Tobias makes it easy. Several people smiled. How? Lauren glanced toward her husband. For a moment, Tobias thought she might say something kind, something true. Instead, she said, because he doesn't really compete for space. A few chuckles appeared around the table. He stays in his lane. More laughter. Tobias remained silent. Lauren continued. Honestly, we're just different people. Nobody interrupted. Nobody changed the subject. Cameron leaned back in his chair. Interested. Watching. Lauren took another sip. You know how some people dream big? The room listened. Tobias has always been happy staying exactly where he is. Someone laughed. Someone else nodded. The momentum had started, and Lauren kept going. He doesn't want more. He doesn't push. He doesn't take risks. Every sentence landed harder than the previous one. Not because strangers were saying them, because his wife was. Tobias looked down at his plate, half-finished steak, cooling beneath restaurant lighting. Around him, nobody seemed uncomfortable enough to stop her. Then Lauren said it, the sentence that would replay in Tobias's memory for months afterward. He's a good man. She paused. A smile appeared, the kind people use before delivering criticism disguised as honesty. But he's small. Silence followed. Not complete silence. Silverware still moved. Glasses still touched tables. But something changed. The room felt different. Several people avoided eye contact. Others pretended to focus on their food. Cameron didn't look away. He held Lauren's gaze, then smiled, just slightly, as though a private conversation had happened without words. Tobias felt surprisingly calm. No anger, no humiliation, not yet. Only clarity, like a photograph finally coming into focus. He suddenly understood something he had been refusing to see for a long time. Lauren wasn't frustrated. She wasn't confused. She had already left the marriage in her mind. This dinner was merely the announcement, the public version, the edited version, The version where everyone else received permission to agree. Tobias picked up his water glass, finished it, set it down. Then his phone vibrated. Once. A single notification. The sound was quiet. Nobody else noticed. Tobias looked at the screen. His expression didn't change, but his attention sharpened instantly. The message contained only 6 words. "Call me tomorrow morning. It's important." The sender's name sat above the text. A name Tobias hadn't heard from in nearly 3 months. A name connected to something far larger than this dinner. Far larger than Lauren. Far larger than Cameron Hayes. Tobias locked the screen, folded his napkin carefully, placed it beside his plate, then stood. "Tobias," Lauren asked. He looked at her, then at Cameron, then around the table. Everyone waiting. Everyone curious. "No problem," he said quietly. "What? You were honest." Lauren blinked. For the first time all evening, uncertainty crossed her face. Tobias reached for his jacket. "I should go." And as he walked toward the exit, the message in his pocket felt heavier than the marriage he had just left behind. The rain followed Tobias all the way home. Seattle looked different after 10 o'clock at night. The traffic thinned. Office towers became dark glass silhouettes. Restaurant patios emptied. The city seemed quieter, more honest. Tobias drove south without turning on the radio. The message remained on his phone. 6 words. "Call me tomorrow morning. It's important." No explanation, no context, only a sender's name. Ethan Mercer. 3 months earlier, Ethan had worked in compliance oversight for North Pacific Medical Systems. Then, he had abruptly disappeared. No farewell email, no retirement announcement, no company celebration. One day he was there. The next day he wasn't. Tobias remembered because he paid attention to details most people ignored. He parked in front of the condominium he and Lauren had purchased 4 years earlier. A modest 2-bedroom unit near West Seattle. Nothing luxurious, nothing impressive. But it had been theirs. At least that was what Tobias had believed. Inside the living room, lights were off. The silence felt unusual. Not painful. Not yet. Just unfamiliar. Lauren traveled often for work. The apartment had been empty before, but this felt different. Permanent. Tobias removed his jacket and hung it near the entrance. Then, he noticed something. The bookshelf. A section was empty. He walked closer. Several framed photographs were gone. Wedding photos. Vacation pictures. A photograph from Mount Rainier. Gone. His eyes moved toward the hallway. The bedroom door stood partially open. The closet looked wrong. Too much space. Too many empty hangers. Tobias stood there for several seconds. No dramatic reaction. No shouting. No broken furniture. Just observation. Piece by piece. Fact by fact. Lauren had already moved. Not planned to move. Not threatened to move. Actually moved. The realization settled quietly, like dust. On the bed sat a white envelope, his name written neatly across the front. Tobias. Nothing else. He opened it. Inside were divorce papers. Prepared. Organized. Ready for filing. The date at the top caught his attention. 3 weeks earlier. 3 weeks. The paperwork had existed for nearly a month. Before tonight. Before Canlis. Before the public humiliation. Before the speech about being small. Lauren had already made her decision. The dinner had simply been theater, a performance for witnesses. Tobias placed the documents back inside the envelope. Then he walked into the kitchen, opened the refrigerator, looked at the leftovers, closed it again. He wasn't hungry anymore. The clock on the microwave read 10:41 p.m. Outside rain tapped against the windows. Inside, silence expanded through the apartment. Most people would have called friends, or family, or demanded explanations. Tobias did none of those things. Instead, he opened a closet near the hallway. A storage closet, ordinary on the outside, organized on the inside. Plastic bins, file boxes, labeled folders, years of records. Not because he was paranoid, because he believed information mattered. Every home repair receipt, every mortgage statement, every insurance document, everything had a place. Lauren used to joke about it. You're one step away from becoming a librarian. Tobias never argued. Organization wasn't exciting, but it was useful. Tonight, usefulness mattered more than excitement. He carried 2 boxes into the dining area, opened his laptop, turned it on. The screen illuminated the room. Slowly, he began reviewing documents. Bank statements, property tax records, joint accounts, retirement contributions. Nothing emotional. Only facts. 1 hour passed, then another. The city slept. Tobias worked. Around 12:30 a.m., he reached a folder he hadn't opened in months. A folder connected to work. The name immediately pulled his attention. North Pacific Medical Systems. The company where Lauren worked. The company where Cameron Hayes had built his reputation. The company connected to Ethan Mercer. The company connected to the message sitting on his phone. Tobias leaned back in his chair. The memories returned. Not all at once. Gradually, like puzzle pieces finding each other. 8 months earlier, Tobias had been assigned to support infrastructure modernization projects at multiple healthcare facilities connected to NPM. Most of the work involved access control systems, network equipment, building security integrations, boring things, the kind nobody noticed unless they stopped working. That was when Tobias first spotted irregularities, tiny inconsistencies. Nothing dramatic, not at first. Access requests appearing after midnight, credentials being used in unusual ways, activity reports that didn't quite align. The kind of details people overlooked because each individual event seemed harmless. But Tobias never evaluated events individually. He looked for patterns. Patterns told stories. And the story he had seen months earlier bothered him enough to document it. He hadn't accused anyone, hadn't reported criminal behavior, hadn't made assumptions. He simply documented what he observed. Dates, times, user activity, system behavior, facts, only facts. The report eventually reached Ethan Mercer. Ethan had requested additional documentation, then additional meetings, then additional records, and then nothing. Ethan disappeared. The investigation vanished. The questions stopped. Life moved on. At least on the surface. Tobias opened another folder. Then another. Then another. Eventually, he reached an encrypted archive stored separately from everything else. The file appeared simple. Just 4 letters. NPM. Followed by 1 word. Compliance. Tobias stared at the folder. Months of observations lived inside. Copies of reports, archived communications, system logs, incident summaries, meeting notes. Everything documented chronologically. Nothing altered. Nothing exaggerated. He entered the password. The archive opened. Hundreds of files appeared. The glow from the monitor reflected across his face. Outside, rain continued falling. Inside, Tobias began reading. The deeper he went, the clearer the timeline became. He remembered why he had preserved everything. Because explanations never arrived. Questions had been ignored. And people who asked questions had quietly disappeared, including Ethan Mercer. At 1:47 a.m., Tobias opened a spreadsheet. A simple document. Rows, columns, research stamps, names. Most were familiar. Department managers, contractors, IT administrators, people he expected to see. Then he stopped. A name appeared halfway down the page. Tobias leaned closer. Read it again, then a third time. His expression changed for the first time that night. Not anger, not shock, concern. Because this wasn't Cameron Hayes. Cameron's name appeared throughout the records already. That wasn't surprising. The new name was different, unexpected, personal. The access history showed repeated connections involving credentials associated with Lauren Griffin's department. Not Lauren directly, but close enough to make Tobias uncomfortable. Very uncomfortable. He opened another report, then another. The same pattern appeared again, and again, and again. His heartbeat slowed. A habit developed from years solving technical problems. The more serious the situation became, the calmer he grew. Emotion created mistakes. Documentation revealed truth. At exactly 2:12 a.m., Tobias opened the final report associated with the access records. Attached to the file was a note written months earlier by Ethan Mercer. Just one sentence. One sentence Tobias had forgotten existed. If these credentials are being used intentionally, the issue is bigger than Cameron. Tobias read the line twice, then a third time. The apartment remained silent. Lauren was gone. The marriage appeared finished. The divorce papers sat 20 feet away on the kitchen counter. Yet suddenly none of that felt like the biggest problem anymore. Because for the first time, Tobias suspected the story he had been watching unfold wasn't about a failed marriage. It was about something much larger. And somewhere inside the hundreds of files on his screen, the answer was waiting. Then his phone vibrated again. A second message from Ethan Mercer appeared. This one was even shorter. Do not discuss this with anyone. Tomorrow, 8 a.m. Tobias Griffin never considered himself a suspicious man. Cautious, yes. Observant, definitely. But suspicion implied assumptions, and assumptions were dangerous, especially around data, especially around evidence, especially around healthcare systems. That was one of the first lessons he learned when he entered the industry almost 12 years earlier. Computers lied less than people. Logs lied less than memories. Timestamps lied less than explanations. That philosophy was the reason he was sitting at his kitchen table at 7:58 the next morning, waiting for Ethan Mercer to call. The apartment felt different in daylight. The empty spaces stood out more clearly. Lauren's coffee mugs were gone. Her favorite blanket was gone. The framed photo from their trip to Oregon was gone. Even the small potted plant she kept near the window had disappeared. The marriage had not ended suddenly. Tobias could see that now. It had been dismantled piece by piece. He simply hadn't noticed until the structure collapsed. At exactly 8 a.m., his phone rang. Ethan Mercer. Tobias answered immediately. Morning. A pause, then Ethan's voice. Tired, careful, like someone choosing every word. Tobias, good to hear you're alive. A quiet laugh. Yeah, same to you. The humor vanished quickly. Neither man called to exchange pleasantries. What happened? Tobias asked. Another pause, longer this time. I can't explain everything over the phone. Try. Ethan exhaled. You remember the access reports? Yes. The investigation never died. That got Tobias's attention. It didn't... No. What happened? It got redirected. Tobias frowned. Redirected where? Up. The answer created more questions than it solved. Ethan continued. After I started digging deeper, somebody above me got involved. Who? I don't know. That's not like you. No, it isn't. Silence followed. Outside, rain tapped against the windows. Seattle looked gray and distant. You found something? Ethan didn't answer immediately, which was answer enough. Finally, he said, found patterns that weren't supposed to exist. What kind of patterns? Executive-level access requests appearing through secondary channels. Tobias leaned back, his attention sharpened. Keep talking. The logs you reported weren't isolated. I figured. There were more. How many, hundreds? Tobias stared through the kitchen window. Hundreds. Not mistakes. Not accidents. Patterns. The exact thing that had bothered him from the beginning. What about Cameron Hayes? Again, the hesitation. Again, the careful choice of words. Cameron's name appeared often. Often. Too often. Neither man said anything for several seconds. Then Ethan lowered his voice. As far as I'm concerned, Cameron is either involved or standing close enough to the fire to get burned. The statement lingered. Not an accusation, not proof, just an observation. The kind Tobias respected. What do you need from me? Ethan answered immediately. Nothing right now. That surprised him. Nothing? No. Then why contact me? Because somebody is going to start asking questions again. What kind of questions? The kind that involve your reports. Tobias remained silent. Ethan continued. When that happens, stick to facts. I always do. I know. Another pause. Then Ethan added something unexpected. And, Tobias, yeah, don't trust internal investigations. The line went quiet. For the first time, Tobias heard genuine concern in Ethan's voice, the kind concern professionals rarely expressed openly. That's not really your style. I know. Then why say it? Because I've watched too many reports disappear. The call ended 3 minutes later. No dramatic revelations. No secret conspiracies. No smoking gun. Just confirmation. The concerns Tobias documented months earlier had been real. And somewhere inside North Pacific Medical Systems, people knew it. That realization followed him throughout the day. Not because he was obsessed, because he understood systems. Every system eventually revealed stress fractures. Marriages, businesses, buildings, networks. The pressure points always appeared before collapse. Most people simply ignored them. 3 years earlier, Tobias had first started working on projects connected to North Pacific Medical Systems. The company operated medical facilities throughout Washington and Oregon. Hospitals, urgent care centers, specialized treatment locations, thousands of employees, millions of patient records, complex infrastructure. His role focused on physical and digital security integration, access systems, credential management, building controls, emergency backups. The work wasn't glamorous. Nobody applauded successful security systems. People only noticed failures, which meant Tobias spent most of his career preventing disasters nobody knew existed. 8 months earlier, during a routine audit, he noticed the first irregularity. A hospital administration wing in Bellevue. Access credentials used at 2:13 a.m. Nothing unusual about after-hours access. Hospitals never slept, but these credentials belonged to employees who weren't scheduled. That was unusual. Tobias documented it. A week later, he found another instance, then another, then another. Different facilities, different departments. Same pattern. Authorized access. Wrong timing. Wrong locations. Wrong circumstances. Each event looked harmless alone. Together they formed a question nobody seemed eager to answer. Tobias submitted reports. Management thanked him. Nothing changed. The incidents continued. Months later, he expanded his documentation, not because anyone asked, because his instincts told him something mattered. That decision would eventually change everything. Around noon, Tobias drove to a healthcare facility near Everett. Routine maintenance, nothing urgent. The job took 3 hours. Replacing outdated monitoring hardware, testing backup systems, updating access control software. Simple work, Predictable work. The kind Tobias preferred. Machines followed rules. People often didn't. By late afternoon, he returned to his truck, opened his laptop, reviewed overnight activity logs. Habit, nothing more. Then he saw it. A new alert. His eyes narrowed. The timestamp showed activity from approximately 1:12 a.m., while he had been reviewing old reports. The request originated from a system connected to North Pacific Medical Systems. Tobias opened the details, read them once, then again. The access attempt had failed, but the destination caught his attention. A secured archive containing historical compliance reports, including reports connected to the incidents Ethan investigated. The attempt lasted less than 40 seconds. Most administrators would ignore it. Tobias didn't. Because people searching for something often revealed what mattered most. He opened additional logs, cross-referenced timestamps, examined authentication records. Eventually he found the originating department, corporate operations, North Pacific headquarters, the same division overseen by Cameron Hayes. A coincidence, maybe? Tobias never rushed to conclusions. He documented the event, created an incident ticket, stored copies, preserved timestamps. The same process he always followed. Facts first, interpretations later. The sun disappeared behind clouds as he drove back toward Seattle. Traffic crawled along Interstate 5. The city lights gradually emerged. By the time he reached home, another message awaited him. This one came through an internal notification system. The subject line seemed ordinary. Routine security inquiry. Tobias opened it. His expression remained neutral, but his pulse slowed. The request came from North Pacific Medical Systems. Someone wanted clarification regarding historical access reports. Specific reports, not random reports. The exact reports connected to Ethan Mercer. The exact reports connected to Cameron Hayes. The exact reports someone had attempted to access the previous night. Interesting. Very interesting. Tobias read the message twice, then saved a copy, then another copy, then a third copy, because experience had taught him something simple. Documents people request suddenly often become documents people wish had disappeared. The apartment remained quiet around him. Lauren hadn't called, hadn't texted, hadn't asked whether he was okay. For the first time, Tobias found that absence useful. Silence created room to think. And the more he thought, the more a troubling realization emerged. His marriage wasn't the only thing unraveling. Something inside North Pacific Medical Systems was unraveling too. The timing felt impossible, yet the two events seemed increasingly connected. Not directly, not obviously, but connected nevertheless. Then another alert appeared on his laptop, a fresh login attempt. Another failed access request, another timestamp, another record. This one originating less than 10 minutes earlier. And for the first time since the divorce papers appeared on his kitchen counter, Tobias felt something approaching concern. Because whoever was searching for those records was no longer acting carefully. They were acting urgently. The first photograph appeared 11 days after Lauren left. Tobias wasn't looking for it. It found him. A coworker from another facility sent a message. No commentary, no opinion, just a screenshot. Tobias opened it during lunch while sitting alone in his truck outside a medical center in Tacoma. The image showed a rooftop bar overlooking downtown Bellevue. Lauren stood beside Cameron Hayes, a glass of champagne in her hand, his arm resting casually around her waist. The city lights glowed behind them. The caption was simple: "Celebrating New Beginnings." Tobias stared at the screen for 3 seconds, then locked his phone, then returned to eating his sandwich. Turkey, Swiss cheese, mustard. The same lunch he had packed for years. No dramatic reaction, no social media response, no phone call, nothing. The coworker eventually texted again. "You okay?" Tobias replied. "I'm fine." And he meant it. Not because the image didn't hurt. It did. But pain and action were different things. One required acknowledgement. The other required choice. Tobias chose silence. Over the next few weeks, the photographs continued appearing, not because he searched for them, because other people sent them. Apparently, Lauren had become visible, very visible. Restaurants in Bellevue, luxury hotels near Lake Washington, corporate charity galas, private wine tastings, weekend trips, a carefully curated version of happiness. One photograph caught Tobias's attention more than the others. Lauren standing beside a white Porsche Cayenne, smiling. The vehicle looked new, expensive, probably leased, maybe purchased. Tobias didn't care about the car. What caught his attention was the caption, "Proud of the life we're building." We're? Interesting choice of word, considering she was still legally married. Again, Tobias said nothing. The divorce process moved forward. Life moved forward. The world kept turning. 3 weeks after the dinner at Canlis, a certified envelope arrived. The return address belonged to a prominent Seattle law firm. Tobias already knew what it contained before opening it. Formal divorce filings, property demands, financial disclosures, requests, claims, expectations. He sat at the dining table and reviewed every page carefully. Not emotionally, methodically, one page at a time, one sentence at a time. Halfway through the packet, Tobias stopped reading. Not because he was angry, because he was surprised. Lauren wasn't asking for a fair division. She was asking for everything she believed she could take. The condominium, most of the joint savings, a significant portion of retirement contributions, additional support payments, several personal assets. The total number sat near the bottom of one page. Tobias looked at it twice, then a third time. Interesting. Very interesting. Because the requests assumed something. They assumed he would panic. They assumed he would settle. They assumed he would feel guilty enough to surrender. Most importantly, they assumed he wasn't prepared. Tobias placed the documents down, then continued reading. Near the end of the packet appeared a statement submitted by Lauren's attorney. The language was polished, professional, carefully written. But the message underneath remained clear. Lauren's legal team intended to portray Tobias as a man lacking financial ambition. A husband who contributed less. A husband whose future earning potential was limited. A husband who depended on Lauren's career advancement. The description felt strangely familiar. Small. The same word. Different packaging. Same message. Tobias leaned back in his chair. The apartment remained quiet. A month earlier, those words might have bothered him. Now they simply felt useful, because every time someone underestimated him, they revealed their strategy. And strategy mattered. His phone rang. Ethan Mercer. "Got a minute?" "Sure. How's life?" Tobias almost laughed. "Complicated. Marriage. Ending." A pause. "I heard." That wasn't surprising. Healthcare networks were smaller than people imagined. News traveled, especially when executives were involved. "What about you?" Tobias asked. Ethan ignored the question. Instead, he asked one of his own. "Anyone contacted you about those reports?" "Yes." "When was 3 days ago? What did they want, though? Historical clarification?" Ethan became quiet. Not a comfortable silence, the kind people used while thinking. Finally, he spoke. "That's accelerating." "What is the interest?" "You expected it." "I expected questions." "But not this fast." Tobias glanced toward the laptop sitting on his table. Several copied files remained stored securely, organized, protected, preserved. "What aren't you telling me?" Ethan sighed. Nothing I can prove. Try anyway. Another pause. Then, I think someone is trying to figure out what records still exist. The sentence lingered. Tobias already suspected as much. The failed access attempts. The document requests. The sudden activity. The pattern was becoming difficult to ignore. What happens if they find them? They already know the records exist. Then why look? Because they don't know who has copies. That answer felt important. Very important. The conversation ended shortly afterward. But the thought remained. Someone was searching. Someone was worried. And worried people often made mistakes. The following week delivered another surprise. A financial disclosure from Lauren. Standard divorce procedure. Income statements. Asset declarations. Property records. Nothing unusual. Until Tobias noticed several expenses. Luxury hotel charges. Frequent travel. Large purchases. Significant increases in lifestyle spending. Again, none of that mattered personally. Lauren could spend money however she wanted. But timing mattered. And timing created questions. Because according to the documents, many of those expenses began before she moved out, before the divorce, before the dinner, before she publicly announced her dissatisfaction. Tobias highlighted the dates. Nothing more. No conclusions. Just observations. That evening, he sat alone reviewing records when another email arrived. This one came directly from Lauren's attorney. The tone was confident, almost dismissive. They wanted mediation scheduled quickly, very quickly, faster than normal, an aggressive timeline. Interesting. Tobias read the message twice, then opened his financial records. The more he reviewed them, the more he noticed small inconsistencies, joint account transfers, minor withdrawals, recurring expenditures. Nothing catastrophic, nothing illegal, but enough to deserve attention, enough to justify questions. The next morning he took a personal day from work, not because he needed rest, because he needed information. Downtown Seattle greeted him with gray skies and cold wind. Office workers hurried between buildings. Traffic filled the streets. The city looked exactly as it always did. Busy, distracted, focused elsewhere. Tobias parked near 4th Avenue and entered a professional office building. The receptionist directed him toward the 19th floor. Law offices occupied the entire level. Glass walls, modern furniture, expensive artwork. The waiting room overlooked Elliott Bay. Tobias arrived 10 minutes early. As usual, while waiting, he observed people entering and leaving conference rooms. Business owners, executives, families, everyone carrying some version of a problem. The receptionist eventually approached. "Mr. Griffin?" Tobias stood. "She's ready for you." The office door opened. A woman in her late 40s stepped forward. Dark suit, sharp eyes, calm expression. The kind of person who noticed details immediately. "Mr. Griffin?" "Tobias is fine." She extended her hand. "Elena Brooks." Tobias shook it. Firm grip, direct eye contact. No wasted motion. Already he liked her. Not because she seemed friendly, because she seemed competent. And competence mattered far more. Elena gestured toward her office. "Come in." Tobias carried a black storage box under one arm. The same box he had spent days organizing. Bank records, financial statements, property documents, timelines, correspondence, evidence, facts. Elena noticed the box immediately, then noticed there were labels attached to every folder inside. Her eyebrows lifted slightly, the smallest reaction. But Tobias saw it, because he always noticed. She sat across from him, opened a legal pad, then asked a simple question. "What exactly are we dealing with?" Tobias placed the box on her desk, opened the lid, And for the first time since Lauren walked away, he allowed someone else to see how carefully he had been paying attention. Elena looked inside, then slowly looked back up at him. The meeting had barely begun. Yet Tobias could already tell something had changed, because for the first time someone wasn't looking at him and seeing a small man. They were looking at preparation, and preparation had a way of changing outcomes. Elena Brooks did not touch the box immediately. She studied Tobias first. That alone separated her from most people he had met during the past month. Others noticed the truck, the work boots, the plain jacket, the quiet voice. Then they reached conclusions. Elena appeared to work in reverse. She evaluated evidence before assumptions. Tobias appreciated that. Her office overlooked Elliott Bay. Cargo ships moved slowly across gray water. The sky hung low over Seattle. Typical weather. Inside the office, everything seemed organized, not decorative, functional. Bookshelves lined one wall. Legal binders filled another. No family photographs. No distractions. Only work. Elena finally pulled the black storage box closer. "You labeled everything." "Yes." She opened the first folder. Bank statements. The second. Mortgage records. The third. Retirement contributions. The fourth. Household expenses. Every document sorted by date. Every date cross-referenced. Every reference highlighted. Elena flipped through several pages, then several more. The expression on her face remained neutral. But Tobias noticed the change in her pace. She stopped skimming, started reading. That was a good sign. 5 minutes later, she closed the folder. "How long have you been organizing records like this?" "Years." "For the divorce?" "No." "For life?" The corner of her mouth moved slightly, almost a smile. Almost. "I wish more clients did that." Tobias remained silent. She opened another folder, then another. Soon a timeline appeared across her desk. Marriage finances, property purchases, account transfers, major expenditures, insurance changes. Everything aligned. Everything documented. The divorce paperwork Lauren submitted sat beside the records. Elena compared them. One page, then another, then another. Eventually she leaned back. "Interesting." Tobias waited. "Your wife is making several claims." "I noticed." "Some of them are aggressive." "I noticed that too." Another small smile. This one slightly more visible. Elena tapped a section of Lauren's filing. "She portrays herself as the primary financial driver." "That's her position." "Is it accurate?" Tobias thought about the question, then answered carefully. "Partially." Elena nodded. The answer seemed to interest her. Many clients exaggerated. Many clients minimized. Few answered precisely. "Explain." Tobias folded his hands. "Lauren earned more money." "How much more?" "Recently about 40% more." "And before that?" "Closer to 20. Elena made a note. "Did you contribute equally to the household?" "Yes." "Can you prove it?" Without speaking, Tobias reached into the box, removed a folder, placed it in front of her. She opened it. Utility payments, mortgage records, repair expenses, insurance contributions, account histories, everything documented, everything traceable. Elena stared at the pages, then at Tobias. "Most people come here angry." "I'm sure. Most people want revenge. I don't." "What do you want?" The answer arrived immediately. The truth. No hesitation, no performance. Just truth. Elena studied him for several seconds, then nodded once. The meeting continued. Hour 1 became hour 2. The divorce itself wasn't especially complicated. No children. One property. Several joint accounts. Retirement assets. Standard issues. But the details surrounding the case felt unusual, especially the timing, especially Cameron Hayes, especially the financial activity appearing before separation. Around noon, Elena reached a specific bank statement. A transfer caught her attention. Not large, not dramatic, just unusual. She pointed toward the date. "What's this?" Tobias looked. The transfer occurred 6 weeks before Lauren moved out. He remembered it immediately. "I asked her." "What did she say?" "Professional expenses." "You believed her at the time." Elena highlighted the entry, then highlighted another. Then another. Several transactions appeared similar, small enough individually to avoid attention. Together they formed a pattern. Elena noticed. So did Tobias. Neither said much. Patterns required verification before conclusions. That was another thing Tobias liked about her. She didn't rush. Good attorneys and good investigators shared that trait. Facts first, interpretations later. Eventually, Elena closed the financial folder. "Now tell me about Cameron Hayes." The room became quieter. Not physically, mentally. The question had finally arrived. Tobias had expected it. He simply wasn't sure when. "What about him?" "Everything." Tobias considered the best place to start, then chose the simplest version. "My wife left me for him." Elena nodded. "I figured." "He works at North Pacific Medical Systems." "I know." "Senior Vice President." "I know that too." She folded her arms. "What I don't know is why I keep seeing his name appear alongside unrelated documents." That statement captured Tobias's attention. "Such as..." Elena reached for several pages. One came from Lauren's filing, another from financial records, another from a disclosure statement. She laid them side by side. "Cameron appears repeatedly." Tobias looked. She was right. Indirect references, business dinners, travel expenses, conference reimbursements, executive events. Nothing illegal, nothing improper by itself, yet his presence seemed unusually frequent, especially before the marriage ended. "Maybe coincidence?" Elena didn't respond, which meant she didn't believe it. Neither did Tobias. The conversation shifted, carefully, gradually, toward North Pacific Medical Systems, toward the compliance records, toward Ethan Mercer, toward the access logs, toward the unusual activity Tobias had documented months earlier. He explained everything, methodically. No dramatic language, no accusations, just chronology, observation, documentation, facts. The more Elena listened, the less she interrupted. That concerned Tobias slightly. Experienced professionals became quiet when something mattered. Finally she spoke. "Do you have copies?" "Yes." "All of it?" "Yes." "Stored where?" "Several places." "Good answer." She seemed relieved. Tobias noticed. Then she asked something unexpected. "Have you shown those records to anyone else?" "Ethan Mercer." "Besides Ethan?" "No." "Good." Again the word. Good. Elena stood and walked toward the office window. For nearly a minute she said nothing. Seattle stretched below. Traffic moved through downtown streets. People hurried through lives they considered urgent. Eventually she turned back. "The divorce and the compliance records need to remain separate." Tobias nodded. He already agreed. Meaning we don't use one to influence the other." "Of course." "Good." She returned to her chair. "If there's misconduct at North Pacific, investigators handle it. And the divorce? I handle that." Simple, professional, clean, exactly the approach Tobias wanted. The meeting continued another 40 minutes. Action items, document requests, financial tracing, property evaluations, next steps. The process felt almost boring. which Tobias appreciated. Boring often meant stable. Stable often produced results. By the time he stood to leave, the sky outside had darkened again. Rain streaked against the glass. Elena gathered several folders. "I'll need copies." "I can provide them." "Tomorrow." "You'll have them tonight." For the first time, Elena laughed. Not loudly, just once. A brief reaction. "I believe you." Tobias picked up the storage box, then paused. There was something else. Elena looked up. "What?" Tobias thought about the failed access attempts, the requests for historical records, the sudden interest, the growing urgency. Then he explained. Every detail, every timestamp, every incident. By the time he finished, Elena's expression had changed. Not alarm, focus. The kind professionals developed after years of dealing with problems. When was the most recent attempt? Last night. Documented? Ooh, yes. Good. She made another note, then another, then another. Finally, she closed the notebook. The gesture felt decisive, as if a line had been drawn, as if the situation had moved into a different category. Tobias reached for the door. Then Elena spoke again. One final question, the question that stayed with him all the way home. "Tobias." He turned. "Yes." Elena's eyes narrowed slightly. "Are you absolutely certain Cameron Hayes doesn't know you kept copies?" The office became completely silent. Tobias considered the question, not emotionally, logically, methodically. Then he answered, "I was certain." Elena didn't look reassured. And now, for the first time in weeks, Tobias wasn't completely sure. 3 days after meeting Elena Brooks, Tobias stopped believing the timing was a coincidence. Not because of a dramatic discovery, not because someone confessed, because people under pressure began behaving differently. And Tobias had spent most of his adult life studying behavior, not human behavior, system behavior. But the principles were surprisingly similar. Healthy systems followed predictable patterns. Unhealthy systems generated noise. North Pacific Medical Systems was generating noise. A lot of it. The first sign arrived shortly after midnight. Tobias was working at a regional health care facility outside Everett. Most of the building slept. Only emergency departments remained active. The maintenance office was quiet. A single desk lamp illuminated the room. Tobias sat reviewing overnight access reports while waiting for a scheduled software update to complete. Routine work. Then an alert appeared. His eyes moved toward the screen. A familiar category. Unauthorized credential validation attempt. Again. He opened the report. The originating request came from a corporate administrative account connected to North Pacific headquarters. Not unusual. Large organizations generated strange system activity constantly. What caught Tobias's attention was the destination. The same protected archive. The same historical compliance repository. The same records connected to Ethan Mercer. The same records someone had already attempted to access twice. Interesting. Very interesting. Tobias documented the event immediately. Timestamp. Origin. Authentication sequence. Request path. Everything. Then he created an incident ticket. Officially, professionally. The same way he always handled unusual activity. Because documentation mattered. Especially when people started acting nervous. By sunrise, he had completed the report. By noon, an unexpected response arrived. The sender worked within North Pacific's Executive Administration Division. The message was brief. Please close incident ticket number 44792. Activity verified as authorized. Tobias read the email twice, then a third time. Something felt wrong. Not because of what the message said, because of what it didn't say. There was no explanation, no supporting documentation, No authorization reference. Nothing. Simply close the ticket. Tobias leaned back in his chair. His instincts sharpened. Healthy organizations rarely worked that way. Good administrators welcomed documentation. Bad administrators feared it. He forwarded the message into his records archive, then left the ticket open. The afternoon passed quietly. At 4 o'clock, his phone rang. The caller ID displayed a familiar name. Lauren. The first call since she moved out. Tobias stared at the screen. Not surprised. Not eager. Just curious. Eventually he answered. "Hello." A brief silence followed. Then Lauren spoke. "You didn't respond." To what? The proposal. Tobias understood immediately. The divorce filing. The financial demands. The property requests. "I received it. And I'm reviewing it." Lauren sounded irritated. Not emotional. Not heartbroken. Impatient. As though he was slowing down a process she expected to move quickly. "It isn't complicated, Tobias." That statement almost made him smile. Complex situations always sounded simple to the people benefiting from them. "I'm still reviewing it." Another pause. Then, "My attorney said you hired someone." "I did." "Why?" Tobias looked out the window. Clouds drifted above Seattle. Traffic moved below. Life continued. "Because attorneys exist for a reason." Lauren sighed. "You're making this harder than it needs to be." Interesting. Very interesting. The phrase stayed with him. Harder for whom he didn't ask. Instead, he listened. People often revealed useful information when allowed to continue speaking. Lauren continued. "Nobody wants a fight." "Good. We should settle everything professionally." "Agreed." "Then why hire a litigation attorney?" There it was. The real question. Not why he hired an attorney. Why he hired Elena Brooks specifically. Tobias noticed the distinction immediately. "How do you know what kind of attorney she is?" Silence, just for a second, but long enough. Then Lauren recovered. "People talk." Of course they did. Seattle wasn't a large city. Professional circles overlapped constantly. Still, something about the exchange bothered him. Not enough to draw conclusions, enough to remember. The call ended shortly afterward. Lauren sounded frustrated. Tobias sounded calm. Nothing changed. Yet something felt different. The pressure was increasing, and pressure created mistakes. 2 days later, the first major mistake appeared. Tobias discovered it by accident, or at least what most people would call an accident. To Tobias, patterns rarely happened accidentally. He was reviewing access activity from a Bellevue facility when a familiar name appeared. Cameron Hayes. Not unusual. Executives frequently required access approvals, but the timestamp was unusual. Saturday, 11:47 p.m. The access request itself wasn't approved. It wasn't even completed. Someone had started the process, then abruptly abandoned it. Tobias opened the details. The request involved a restricted administrative reporting system, one containing archived compliance records. The same records. Again. He stared at the screen, then reviewed historical activity. The pattern became obvious. Repeated attempts, different methods, different users, same destination. Whoever wanted those records wasn't browsing. They were hunting. The realization stayed with him all weekend. Monday morning brought another development. An internal memorandum circulated throughout North Pacific. Mandatory cybersecurity review. Department audits. Administrative account verification. The language sounded routine. The timing didn't. Someone was nervous. Very nervous. Around noon, Ethan Mercer called again. This time his voice sounded more alert than usual. "What happened?" Tobias skipped the greeting. Ethan laughed softly. "I was about to ask you the same thing. You first. There's movement." "What kind? Cool corporate movement?" That wasn't an answer. Ethan knew it. He continued. "People who ignored the issue 6 months ago suddenly care. Why, that's the question." Tobias thought about the access attempts, the incident tickets, the pressure to close documentation, the audit announcements, the executive involvement. A picture was forming, not complete, but visible. "What are you hearing?" Ethan lowered his voice. "Unofficially, yes. Cameron Hayes has been spending a lot of time in meetings." That got Tobias's attention. "What kind of meetings?" "No idea. But the board is involved." The board. That mattered. Executive problems became different problems when boards started paying attention. The call ended. The questions remained. Later that evening, Tobias received another notification. Not from North Pacific. Not from Ethan. From one of the security systems he maintained. An automated alert, normally ignored. Tonight it wasn't. He opened it. His expression hardened slightly. A credential validation attempt had occurred less than 20 minutes earlier. The originating account belonged to a contractor. The location belonged to North Pacific headquarters. The destination, again. The compliance archive, again. But this time there was something new. Something important. The attempt generated an associated security camera trigger. Tobias accessed the footage. The video quality wasn't perfect, but it was sufficient. A man entered a restricted office, used a workstation, remained there approximately 4 minutes, then left. Tobias watched the footage twice, then a third time. The individual wasn't Cameron Hayes, but Tobias recognized him immediately, one of Cameron's executive assistants. Interesting. Very interesting. Because assistants rarely searched for compliance records on their own, which meant someone likely instructed him. Again, Tobias documented everything. No accusations, no conclusions, only facts. The next morning he submitted another incident report, official channels, official procedures, exactly as required. By lunchtime a response arrived, this one from higher management. The wording was noticeably stronger. Close the matter immediately. Further documentation unnecessary. Tobias stared at the screen, then saved a copy, then another copy, then archived both, because the request itself had become evidence, not evidence of wrongdoing, evidence of urgency, and urgency always mattered. That evening, while driving home through downtown Seattle, Tobias received a text message from Elena Brooks. "Call me when you can." No explanation, no details. Tobias pulled into a parking lot. Called immediately. Elena answered on the first ring. "I just received something unusual." "What?" "A discovery response." Tobias waited. Elena continued. "Lauren's attorneys disclosed additional communications." "Okay." Another pause, then Elena spoke carefully. "One of those communications involves Cameron Hayes." Tobias's attention sharpened instantly. "How? That's the interesting part." Rain tapped softly against the windshield. Traffic moved through the city around him. Elena's voice remained calm, professional, measured. Yet Tobias could hear it, the same thing he had noticed during their first meeting. Concern. Real concern. Because whatever Elena had just found, it wasn't supposed to exist. Elena Brooks never sounded alarmed. That was one of the reasons Tobias trusted her. She didn't exaggerate. She didn't speculate. She didn't create drama. So when she said she had found something unusual, Tobias paid attention. "What kind of communication?" he asked. Rain slid down his windshield while traffic crawled through downtown Seattle. Elena's answer came immediately. "Email." "Between who? Lauren and Cameron?" Tobias remained silent. The pause encouraged her to continue. The problem isn't that they communicated. Of course not. The problem is when they communicated. Now Tobias understood. Timing. Timing changed everything. When? Several months before the separation. Interesting. Very interesting. Because Lauren's legal filings painted a very specific picture. A marriage that deteriorated gradually. A relationship that ended naturally. A connection with Cameron that developed afterward. Clean. Simple. Convenient. Reality rarely followed convenient timelines. What did the emails show? Nothing explicit. That surprised him. Elena noticed. Don't sound disappointed. I'm not. You shouldn't be. She paused. People reveal more through patterns than words. Tobias smiled slightly. That sounded familiar. Very familiar. What pattern did you see? Elena flipped through papers on her desk. Tobias could hear pages moving through the phone. Frequent private meetings. Okay. Repeated travel coordination. Okay. Conversations about future plans. Tobias's expression remained unchanged, not because he didn't care, because he already suspected most of it. What mattered was documentation, proof, dates, evidence, facts. Those things mattered. Emotions didn't. Anything else? Another pause. Then, one email references a property search. Tobias looked toward the rain-covered windshield. A property search. Condominiums. When, nearly 2 months before she moved out. That mattered. Not because of the relationship, because of preparation. People planning future living arrangements weren't usually confused about their current ones. The call lasted another 15 minutes. When it ended, Tobias drove home. The city lights blurred through the rain. The information didn't make him angry. Anger required surprise. Nothing about Lauren's behavior surprised him anymore. What interested him was structure. The structure behind decisions. And increasingly, the structure looked planned. Not spontaneous. Planned. 3 weeks later, the deposition arrived. A law office near Pike Place Market. Thursday morning. 9 o'clock. The weather was cold even by Seattle standards. Tobias arrived early, as always. The conference room looked exactly like every conference room he had ever seen. Neutral walls, long table, coffee station, artificial lighting, nothing memorable, which was probably intentional. Important conversations rarely happened in interesting rooms. Elena arrived a few minutes later carrying 2 binders, no briefcase, no dramatic presentation, just binders, organized, labeled, prepared, the same way Tobias liked things. You sleep? She asked it casually. Enough. Good. Lauren, Elena shrugged. No idea. That answer made Tobias smile slightly, because it was honest. 10 minutes later, Lauren entered the room. The first thing Tobias noticed was how polished she looked. Designer suit, perfect hair, carefully controlled expression. She looked like someone attending a corporate meeting, not someone dissolving a marriage. Cameron entered behind her. That caught Tobias's attention. Not because Cameron's presence was unusual, because technically it was. This wasn't his divorce. Yet there he was, confident, relaxed, comfortable, almost as if he expected to be there. Interesting. Very interesting. The attorneys exchanged greetings. Procedures were reviewed. Recording equipment was tested. Formalities completed. Then the questioning began. At first, everything felt routine. Names, addresses, employment history, marriage timeline, property ownership, financial disclosures, standard questions, standard answers. Lauren performed well, too well. Prepared answers often sounded polished. Authentic answers sounded human. Tobias noticed the difference immediately. Elena noticed too. but neither interrupted. The process continued. Nearly an hour passed, then the conversation shifted. Marriage dynamics, relationship history, reasons for separation. Lauren sat upright in her chair, confident, controlled, comfortable. The narrative appeared familiar. Tobias recognized it instantly. The same narrative from Canlis, the same narrative from the divorce filings, the same narrative from every interaction since she left. Tobias is a good person. A pause. He just lacked ambition. Another pause. We wanted different things. The attorney nodded. Lauren continued. I grew professionally. And Tobias didn't. He remained comfortable. Comfortable. Interesting word. The room remained quiet. Lauren kept talking. He never wanted more. He resisted change. He avoided opportunities. The language sounded polished, refined, repeated, almost rehearsed. Tobias sat quietly, listening, observing, the same way he observed system logs, the same way he observed patterns. People often revealed themselves when they believed nobody was challenging them. Eventually, Elena leaned forward, the first sign she was about to engage. Mrs. Griffin? Lauren turned. Yes, you mentioned ambition. Yes. What specifically do you mean? A simple question. Lauren answered immediately. Career advancement. Elena nodded. Income. Partially. Professional growth. Yes. Recognition, certainly. Everything sounded reasonable. That was the strength of partial truths. They sounded believable. Then Elena asked another question. When did you first decide the marriage might be over? Lauren hesitated. Only briefly, but Tobias noticed. So did Elena. Approximately 3 months before separation. Elena made a note, then another question. When did you begin discussing future housing arrangements? The hesitation became longer, not dramatic, just measurable. After separation. Elena opened a binder, removed a document, placed it on the table. The room became quieter. Would reviewing this refresh your memory? Lauren looked down. The color in her face changed slightly. Not much, just enough. Tobias couldn't see the document, but he didn't need to. He already knew. The property search, the condominium references, the timeline. Lauren read silently, then looked back up. The confidence had shifted, not disappeared. Shifted. Those were casual conversations. Interesting answer. Not denial. Interpretation. Elena noticed. Casual enough to discuss specific move-in dates. Silence. The attorneys exchanged looks. Lauren adjusted her posture. Tobias remained still. For the first time all morning, Cameron moved slightly in his chair, almost imperceptibly. But Tobias saw it, because he watched details. Always. The deposition continued. Question after question. Answer after answer. Nothing explosive. Nothing dramatic. Yet gradually something changed. The story stopped flowing smoothly. Small contradictions emerged. Tiny inconsistencies. Date conflicts. Timeline issues. Communication records. Nothing catastrophic. Individually meaningless. Collectively interesting. Very interesting. Around noon, Elena shifted direction entirely. The move surprised everyone, including Tobias. She opened another binder. Financial records, bank statements, travel expenses, disclosure documents. Lauren's attorney immediately became more attentive. That alone told Tobias something important. Money worried them. Elena asked a simple question. Did anyone assist you financially before separation? Lauren blinked. No. Not even informally. No. Elena slid another page forward. Please review Exhibit 21. Lauren looked. The silence lasted longer this time. Cameron's expression changed, only slightly, but enough. The room felt different now, less confident, more cautious. Exactly what happens when narratives meet documentation. After another hour, the deposition ended. No explosions, no accusations, no courtroom speeches, just records, facts, questions, and increasingly uncomfortable answers. The participants gathered their materials. Attorneys spoke quietly. Lauren avoided looking directly at Tobias. Cameron appeared distracted. The confidence he carried into the room seemed lighter now. Not gone. Reduced. As Tobias and Elena walked toward the elevator, she handed him a copy of several notes. "You noticed it too." It wasn't a question. "No." Elena looked surprised. "No, I noticed 3 things." That made her laugh. "Of course you did." Outside, Pike Place bustled with tourists and commuters. Life continued. Rain fell. Cars moved. The city remained indifferent. Tobias glanced at his phone. A new notification waited. Unknown number, no name, no explanation. Just a voicemail. Received 8 minutes earlier. The timestamp coincided almost exactly with the end of the deposition. Interesting. Very interesting. He pressed play. A man's voice filled the speaker. Professional, calm, unfamiliar. "Mr. Griffin, my name is Nathan Cole." The name meant nothing yet. The next sentence changed that immediately. "I'm calling regarding information you submitted several months ago involving North Pacific Medical Systems." Tobias listened to the voicemail twice before calling back. Not because he doubted what he heard, because he had learned something important over the years. Details mattered more the second time. Sometimes the third. The voice belonged to a man who sounded calm, controlled, professional. No urgency, no intimidation, no pressure. That alone separated him from most people Tobias had encountered recently. The number traced to a federal office building in downtown Seattle. Interesting. Very interesting. By the time Tobias returned the call, it was nearly 4 o'clock. The man answered on the second ring. "Nathan Cole, Tobias Griffin. Mr. Griffin, thank you for calling back." The tone remained professional, measured, no wasted words. Already Tobias liked him. "What can I help you with?" A brief pause. Not hesitation, procedure. "We're reviewing information connected to a compliance matter involving North Pacific Medical Systems." Tobias glanced across the street. Tourists moved between shops near Pike Place Market. None of them knew their afternoon was ordinary. His suddenly wasn't. What kind of review? An official one. Another carefully chosen answer. Tobias noticed. Nathan Cole noticed that Tobias noticed. The silence lasted a moment. Then the investigator continued. "You submitted documentation several months ago." "Correct." "Do copies still exist?" "Interesting. Not what happened. Not who was involved. Not what Tobias believed. Simply whether copies existed." The question alone revealed a great deal. Yes. Complete copies? Yes. Original formatting? Yes. Nathan became quiet for a moment. Then, good. The same word Elena used. Good. Professionals appreciated preserved evidence. That was becoming increasingly clear. The conversation continued for nearly 20 minutes. Nathan never asked Tobias for theories, never asked for accusations, never asked what he suspected. Instead, he focused entirely on records, dates, reports, timelines, storage methods, documentation procedures, questions designed to evaluate credibility. Tobias answered each one carefully, precisely, without embellishment. When the call finally ended, Nathan made a request. "We'd like to meet." "Where?" "Our office." "When?" "Tomorrow morning." Tobias agreed immediately. Then he drove home through heavy traffic. The city felt different now, not because anything had changed, because a federal investigator had entered the story, and federal investigators rarely entered stories by accident. The next morning began with rain. Again, Seattle seemed determined to remain gray. Tobias arrived at the federal office building 12 minutes early. As always, security procedures took several minutes. Identification, screening, visitor registration. Nothing unusual. Eventually, an assistant escorted him upstairs. Nathan Cole's office looked surprisingly ordinary. No dramatic atmosphere. No intimidating decorations. Just a desk, several chairs, file cabinets, and a man in his mid-40s wearing a navy suit. Nathan stood, shook Tobias's hand. Firm grip, direct eye contact. Professional. The similarities to Elena Brooks immediately stood out. Another person who seemed interested in facts rather than personalities. They sat. Nathan opened a notebook, then began. "I've reviewed your reports." Tobias waited. "They're unusually thorough. Thank you. You documented everything." "I try to." Nathan nodded. Again. Approval. Not emotional approval. Professional approval. The kind that mattered more. For nearly 2 hours they reviewed records, one document at a time. Nathan asked questions. Tobias answered them. Nothing dramatic happened. No revelations, no accusations, just careful examination. Yet throughout the meeting, Tobias noticed something interesting. Nathan kept returning to the same issue. Access authorization pathways. Again and again. Different angles, different questions. Same tie. Eventually, Tobias asked why. Nathan closed one folder, opened another, then answered. "Because that's where the pattern exists." The statement hung in the air. What pattern? Nathan considered the question, then chose his words carefully. A system designed to leave minimal footprints. Tobias immediately understood. Someone wasn't simply accessing information. Someone was attempting to conceal how they accessed information. That mattered. A lot. By lunchtime, the meeting concluded. Nathan collected copies, verified chain of custody procedures, documented transfer records. Everything formal. Everything organized. Before Tobias left, Nathan asked one final question. "Do you know Cameron Hayes personally?" Interesting. The first direct reference. "No." "Have you ever interacted with him professionally?" "Very little." "Any disputes?" "No." Nathan nodded slowly, as though confirming something. "What?" The investigator leaned back. "People keep mentioning his name." That answer stayed with Tobias. People. Plural. Not one person. Multiple people. The implication mattered. Outside the federal building, Tobias stood beneath the rain for several seconds before walking toward his truck. Something was happening. Not speculation, not intuition, something real, something measurable. The pieces were moving. The question was where they would eventually land. 3 days later, North Pacific Medical Systems announced an internal review. The memo circulated quickly. Employees discussed it quietly. Managers avoided details. Executives remained silent. Tobias obtained a copy through standard channels. The wording appeared harmless. Routine review, compliance evaluation, administrative procedures, corporate language. But timing mattered. Always. And the timing looked terrible. The announcement arrived less than a week after federal investigators contacted him. Coincidence, maybe. But Tobias increasingly doubted coincidence. That evening, Ethan Mercer called again. His voice sounded different, more alert, more focused. "What happened?" Tobias asked. "You tell me." Nothing. Ethan laughed. Then why are executives panicking? Interesting. Very interesting. Panic. That's the word. Tobias remained silent. Ethan continued on. I still have contacts inside. Okay. Cameron has been in non-stop meetings. That caught Tobias's attention. With who? Legal. The word landed heavily. Legal. Not public relations, not operations. Legal. That mattered. A lot. What kind of meetings? No idea. But something changed. The call ended shortly afterward. The information remained. And over the next week, the pattern intensified. More document requests, more administrative reviews, more unusual system activity. Not enough to create conclusions, enough to create concern. Then came Friday. The day everything accelerated. Tobias arrived at work shortly before midnight. A routine maintenance window had been scheduled. Nothing unusual. The facility remained quiet. The systems behaved normally. Until 1:17 a.m. An alert appeared. His eyes immediately moved toward the screen. Another access request. Another attempt involving protected archives. But this one was different. The request succeeded. For exactly 22 seconds, then terminated. Tobias sat upright. That had never happened before. Every previous attempt failed. This one didn't. He opened the logs, read them carefully. Then again. Then a third time. The originating credentials belonged to an executive administrative account. The access path bypassed normal procedures, and the destination involved historical compliance files, including records associated with Ethan Mercer, including records associated with previous investigations, including records associated with Cameron Hayes. Interesting. Very interesting. Tobias immediately documented everything. Screenshots, logs, verification copies, incident tickets, the same process he always followed. The difference came 30 minutes later, because this time the response arrived almost immediately. Too immediately. An email appeared, then another, then a phone call, all requesting the same thing. Close the ticket, archive the event, treat it as authorized. The speed itself became evidence. Nobody moved that quickly for routine issues. Nobody. Tobias saved every communication, every timestamp, every request. Then forwarded copies to secure storage. By sunrise, he had accumulated more documentation in 6 hours than during the previous month. Around 9 o'clock, his phone rang. Nathan Cole. The investigator sounded more serious than before. Mr. Griffin, Agent Cole, we need to speak. That got Tobias's attention immediately. What happened? A pause. Then, the matter we've been reviewing expanded overnight. The wording felt deliberate, controlled, careful. What does that mean? Nathan exhaled slowly. It means North Pacific Medical Systems just received formal notification. Notification. One word. Massive implications. Tobias stared through the windshield. Rain covered the parking lot. Employees walked into buildings completely unaware of what was happening. What kind of notification? Nathan answered without hesitation. The kind that gets board members involved. The line went quiet, and for the first time since Lauren called him small. At Canlis, Tobias realized the situation had grown beyond executives, beyond departments, beyond company politics. The board was now involved, and boards only became involved when consequences were approaching. 4 months changed more than Tobias Griffin expected. Not overnight, not dramatically, slowly, quietly. The way most real change happens. The divorce still wasn't finalized. The investigation still wasn't public. The questions surrounding North Pacific Medical Systems still existed. But Tobias no longer woke up thinking about Lauren. That surprised him. For weeks after she left, her absence occupied space in his mind. Not because he wanted her back, because routine had disappeared. People often confused missing someone with missing familiarity. Tobias understood the difference, and by the fourth month, familiarity had been replaced. New routines, new schedules, new priorities. The apartment looked different, cleaner, simpler. The empty spaces Lauren left behind were no longer empty. They had become normal. On Saturday mornings, Tobias drove to Tacoma, not for work, for himself, a small woodworking shop rented by a retired contractor named Frank Delaney. The arrangement started accidentally. Now it felt important, useful, healthy. Frank taught him furniture restoration. Tobias taught Frank how to stop forgetting passwords. Both considered the arrangement fair. Life moved forward. The investigation moved forward too, just more quietly. Nathan Cole rarely called, which Tobias considered a positive sign. Investigators who called constantly usually lacked evidence. Investigators who disappeared were often busy building cases. Twice, Nathan requested additional documentation. Twice, Tobias provided it. Nothing more, nothing less. Facts. Only facts. Then, one Tuesday morning, the first crack appeared publicly. Tobias was drinking coffee before work when Ethan Mercer called. No greeting, no small talk, just one sentence. "It's happening." Interesting. Very interesting. "What is going?" "The board meeting." Tobias sat down. The coffee suddenly became irrelevant. "What board meeting?" "The board meeting." Ethan emphasized the word. The implication became obvious. North Pacific's Board of Directors. Emergency session. Not quarterly. Not scheduled. Emergency. That mattered. A lot. "What triggered it?" Ethan laughed softly. "You already know." Tobias probably did. The audit reviews, the compliance questions, the document requests, the federal interest, the growing panic. Pressure eventually reached the top. It always did. The call ended shortly afterward. Yet throughout the day, Tobias found himself thinking about it. Not emotionally, structurally. Large organizations protected executives until they couldn't. Then they protected themselves. And when those interests conflicted, executives usually lost. 3 days later, another development arrived. LinkedIn. Of all places, Tobias rarely used social media, almost never. But dozens of people in healthcare administration did. Rumors traveled there before newspapers noticed them. That Friday afternoon, a former colleague sent him a screenshot. Again, no commentary, no explanation. Just an image. Tobias opened it. The post came from North Pacific Medical Systems. A corporate announcement. Brief, professional, carefully worded, leadership transition. Those 2 words immediately captured his attention. He read the statement, then read it again. Cameron Hayes was no longer listed as senior vice president. The announcement avoided specifics, mutual decision, organizational restructuring, future opportunities, corporate language, meaningless language. But Tobias understood what mattered. The title was gone. Cameron's position was gone, and positions rarely disappeared without reasons. His phone vibrated. Another message, another screenshot, then another. People were talking, quietly, carefully, but talking. By evening, industry forums had begun discussing the situation openly. Contractor groups, healthcare networks, administrative circles. Nobody possessed complete information. Everyone possessed partial information. That was enough. Tobias didn't participate. He observed. As always. Then Saturday arrived, and with it confirmation. Nathan Cole called shortly after noon. "Tobias." "Agent Cole?" You've probably seen the announcement. I have. Nathan paused, then chose his words carefully. Cameron Hayes no longer works for North Pacific Medical Systems. There it was. Not reassigned, not transitioning, gone. The distinction mattered. Tobias remained silent. Nathan continued. I can't discuss details. Understood. But I thought you should hear it directly. That surprised him. Why? Another pause. Then, because your documentation mattered. Simple words. Unexpected weight. For a moment, neither man spoke. Tobias looked out the apartment window. Rain covered the city again. Seattle looked exactly the same. Yet something significant had changed. Months earlier, he sat alone at a restaurant while people laughed. Now one of the most powerful people in that room no longer had the position that made him powerful. Interesting how quickly circumstances changed. The call ended, the day continued, then Sunday arrived. And Lauren called. For the first time in nearly 4 months. Tobias recognized the number immediately. The screen illuminated his kitchen counter. Her name appeared. He stared at it. 1 ring, 2 rings, 3. The phone continued vibrating. Tobias didn't rush. People who spent months silent rarely needed immediate responses. Eventually he answered. Hello? Silence. Not technical silence. Human silence. The kind people create when reality doesn't match expectations. Finally, Lauren spoke. Tobias, her voice sounded different. Not broken, not emotional. Different. The confidence was missing. That was the first thing Tobias noticed. The second thing was exhaustion. Deep exhaustion. The kind people carried after long weeks. Lauren. Another pause. I wasn't sure you'd answer. Interesting. Very interesting. Because 4 months earlier she seemed certain about everything. Now uncertainty had entered the conversation. What do you need? No hostility. No warmth. Just a question. Lauren exhaled slowly. I'm in Bellevue. Okay. I wanted to talk. Tobias leaned against the kitchen counter. Outside, traffic moved through wet streets. Inside, everything remained still. About what? The silence returned. Longer this time. Then, a lot has happened. True. Very true. Yes. Another pause. Then Lauren said something unexpected. Cameron lied. Tobias didn't respond immediately. Not because he was shocked, because he wanted her to continue. People often revealed more when not interrupted. Lauren did exactly that. He lied about several things. Okay. He wasn't who I thought he was. Interesting. The statement sounded familiar. Not because of the words, because of the structure. People describing consequences often preferred discussing deception rather than decisions. Tobias noticed. As always. What kind of things? Lauren hesitated, then answered carefully. Financial things. Interesting. Very interesting. Because Elena Brooks would probably enjoy hearing that. What financial things? I don't know everything. But you know something. Silence. Again. The conversation felt completely different from their previous calls. Months earlier, Lauren spoke with certainty. Now she sounded cautious, measured, almost worried. Tobias? Yes. Can we meet? The request hung between them. Tobias considered it. Not emotionally, practically. What for? I want to explain. Explain. Another interesting word. Because explanations generally arrived after consequences, not before. The rain intensified outside. Water streaked across the windows. Lauren spoke again, softer this time. Please. Tobias thought about the question. Thought about Elena. Thought about the investigation. Thought about Cameron's sudden departure. Thought about 4 months of silence. Then he answered. "We can talk." Relief entered her voice immediately, noticeably. "When? Not today. Tomorrow, maybe." Another pause. Then Lauren said something that captured his attention completely. Not because she intended it to, because she wasn't careful enough. Cameron used people. Tobias remained silent. She continued. He used departments. He used credentials. The words landed heavily. Credentials. A very specific word. Not accounts, not employees. Credentials. Technical language. The kind most people didn't use casually. Tobias's attention sharpened instantly, because somewhere across Seattle, Elena Brooks would find that detail extremely interesting. And for the first time during the call, Tobias suspected Lauren knew more than she realized. Much more. The conversation ended 10 minutes later. Nothing resolved, nothing repaired. Yet something important had happened. Lauren had called, not because she missed him, not because she regretted leaving, because the world she chose was collapsing. And people often reached for familiar ground when instability arrived. Tobias set his phone down, then immediately opened a notebook. 1 page, 1 date, 1 time, 1 summary. Just facts. Only facts. The same habit that had carried him this far. Then he reached for his phone again. Not to call Lauren, to call Elena Brooks, because one sentence from that conversation deserved immediate attention. He used credentials. And something told Tobias that sentence would matter far more than Lauren realized. Elena Brooks answered on the second ring. It was nearly 8:30 on a Sunday evening. Most attorneys weren't working. Elena rarely seemed to follow normal schedules. "Tobias, I just got off the phone with Lauren." The silence on the other end sharpened immediately. "Interesting. That's what I thought." Elena waited, not impatiently, professionally, allowing him to organize the facts. Tobias appreciated that. Too many people rushed conversations. Important information rarely survived rushing. He walked to the dining table, opened his notebook, and reviewed the notes he had written immediately after the call. Time, date, duration, key statements. Exactly as he documented everything else. Then he began. Word for word. He repeated Lauren's comments about Cameron, the financial issues, the collapse of his position, the request to meet, the change in her demeanor, and finally, the statement about credentials. When Tobias reached that part, Elena interrupted for the first time. "Stop." Tobias did. "Repeat that exactly." He read directly from his notes. He used people. He used departments. He used credentials. Silence. Not uncertainty, processing. Elena was thinking. Tobias could almost hear it. Finally, she spoke. "Did she elaborate?" "No." "Did you ask?" "Not directly." Good. That surprised him. Why? Because people reveal more when they believe they're speaking freely. That made sense. It also sounded exactly like something Tobias would say. "We need to preserve the conversation. It's already documented?" "I figured." Elena paused, then asked something unexpected. "Washington is a 2-party consent state." "I know." "Did you record it?" "No." "Good." Another surprise. Elena laughed softly. "You look disappointed." "A little." "Trust me, you don't want procedural problems." Fair enough. The call continued for another 15 minutes. By the end, Elena made a recommendation. Meet Lauren. Carefully. Public place. Limited conversation. No arguments. No emotional discussions. Just observation. Again, Tobias appreciated the approach. Facts first. Everything else later. The following afternoon, Lauren texted him. "Can we meet today?" No greeting. No explanation, just the request. Tobias looked at the message while standing outside a healthcare facility near Everett. Rain covered the parking lot. Employees hurried between buildings. Life continued. He replied, "Tomorrow, public place." The response arrived almost immediately. "Thank you." Interesting. Very interesting. Because gratitude had been absent from their interactions for months. The next day arrived gray and cold. Seattle remained committed to being Seattle. Lauren suggested a hotel cafe in Bellevue. Tobias suggested somewhere else, a coffee shop near Lake Washington. Neutral, public, simple. Lauren agreed. He arrived first, as always. The cafe overlooked the water. Large windows, wooden tables, quiet atmosphere. The afternoon crowd remained small, a good location for conversation, a bad location for drama. Tobias sat near the window, ordered black coffee, opened a notebook, reviewed work schedules while waiting. At exactly 2:07 p.m., Lauren entered. The first thing Tobias noticed wasn't her clothing, or her expression, or her appearance. It was what was missing. Confidence, the certainty that had surrounded her at Canlis, the certainty that appeared during the divorce filings, the certainty that accompanied Cameron Hayes. Gone. Not completely. Partially. Enough to notice. She sat across from him. Neither spoke immediately. The waitress approached. Lauren ordered tea. The waitress left. Silence returned. Finally, Lauren spoke. "You look good." "Interesting opening." Tobias nodded politely. "So do you." It wasn't entirely true. Lauren looked tired. Not physically, mentally. The difference mattered. For several seconds she stared toward the lake, gathering thoughts, organizing explanations. Eventually, she began. "I know you're probably angry." Tobias said nothing. Because he wasn't, and because silence often encouraged honesty. Lauren continued. "Things haven't gone the way I expected." True. Probably. Not especially informative. She seemed to realize that. Her shoulders dropped slightly. The performance became harder to maintain. Cameron wasn't who I thought he was. There it was again. The same theme. Tobias waited. "What does that mean?" Lauren looked down at her tea, then back up. "He told different stories to different people." "Okay." "He hid things." "Such as?" A pause, long enough to matter. Then, "financial arrangements." Interesting. Again. The phrase kept returning. Financial arrangements, not mistakes, not misunderstandings, arrangements. The language felt deliberate. Tobias noticed. "Always," Lauren continued. "He always seemed in control. And now," she laughed softly, a humorless sound. "Now, I don't know." The admission felt genuine. For the first time all afternoon. Not because Tobias believed everything she said, because uncertainty is difficult to fake. People pretending certainty sounded rehearsed. People genuinely uncertain sounded uncomfortable. Lauren sounded uncomfortable. The conversation drifted, not toward reconciliation, not toward romance, toward consequences. Professional consequences, personal consequences, practical consequences. Eventually, Tobias asked a direct question. "When did you realize there was a problem?" The answer arrived immediately. "The board meeting." Interesting. Very interesting. Because that matched Ethan's timeline, matched Nathan's timeline, matched the compliance review, matched everything. "What happened?" Lauren hesitated, then looked around the cafe, checking who might be listening. A habit Tobias immediately noticed. When people feared information leaving a room, it usually meant information mattered. There were attorneys. Okay. Outside attorneys. Interesting. She continued. People from compliance. Okay. People from auditing. Another piece, another detail, another confirmation. The picture continued forming. What did Cameron say? Lauren stared out the window. The lake reflected gray clouds. For a moment she seemed far away. Then, not much. Why not? He was trying to figure out what they knew. That answer captured Tobias's attention. Because innocent people usually ask different questions. What happened? Who reported this? How do we fix it? Not, what do they know? The distinction mattered. A lot. Lauren kept talking. More than she intended. Tobias recognized the pattern. People carrying stress often wanted relief. Conversation became relief. He kept making phone calls. To who? I don't know. He seemed worried. A short laugh. Worried isn't the word. Interesting. Very interesting. The waitress returned briefly. Refilled coffee, refilled tea, then left. Lauren lowered her voice. There was something else. Tobias remained silent, waiting, observing, listening. Finally, she continued, Cameron used other departments. The phrase immediately reminded him of their phone conversation. He used credentials. Again, the same word. Credentials. Technical language. Specific language. Not casual language. Tobias's attention sharpened. What does that mean? I don't know exactly. Not entirely true. He could hear it. She knew something. Maybe not everything. Something. He asked people for access. Access to what? I don't know. Another partial truth. Again, again, again. Tobias didn't challenge her. No reason to. People rarely volunteered information after confrontation. They often volunteered it after patience. The conversation lasted nearly another hour. Most of it felt unimportant. Regret, disappointment, excuses, confusion, human emotions, human consequences. Tobias listened politely. Nothing more. Then just before they stood to leave, Lauren made a mistake. A small mistake. The kind people made when tired, the kind Tobias noticed. Always. She said, I never thought he'd use my department. The sentence escaped naturally. Without planning. Without caution. Without realizing its significance. The moment it left her mouth, Lauren froze. Tobias saw it immediately. So did she. The correction arrived too fast. I mean, too late. The damage was done. Not dramatic damage. Factual damage. The best kind. Tobias remained calm. What do you mean? Lauren looked away. Toward the lake. Toward the rain. Toward anything except him. I don't know. Another pause. Then, I should go. Interesting. Very interesting. Because people rarely ended conversations immediately after revealing nothing. They ended conversations after revealing too much. The meeting concluded minutes later. No reconciliation. No closure. No emotional breakthrough. Just information. Useful information. As Lauren walked toward the parking lot, Tobias remained seated, watching rain strike the water, reviewing every word, every pause, every hesitation, every inconsistency. Patterns. Always patterns. His phone vibrated. A text message from Elena Brooks. How did it go? Tobias looked once more toward Lauren's departing figure, then typed a reply. Better than expected. A minute later, Elena responded. Why? Tobias stared at the screen, then wrote, Because I think she just confirmed something she wasn't supposed to know. The meeting at Columbia Bank was scheduled for 9 a.m. on a Thursday. Elena Brooks arrived at 8:47. Tobias arrived at 8:43. Neither considered that unusual. Preparation had become a language both understood. The bank occupied several floors of a modern office building overlooking downtown Seattle. Glass walls, private conference rooms, professional silence, the kind of place where large financial problems quietly became larger. Tobias entered carrying 2 folders. Elena carried 1 legal binder. Waiting inside the conference room was a third person, a woman in her early 50s with silver-framed glasses and a tablet computer. Elena introduced her. Rachel Whitaker. The woman stood. Firm handshake, direct eye contact, professional. Forensic accountant. Interesting. Very interesting. Tobias immediately understood why she was there. Numbers often told stories people tried to hide. Rachel specialized in finding those stories. The meeting began without ceremony. No small talk. No wasted time. Rachel connected her tablet to a monitor. Financial records appeared on the screen. Bank transfers. Account histories. Transaction timelines. Months of information organized into neat columns. To most people, it looked boring. To Tobias, it looked familiar. Patterns. Again. Always patterns. Rachel tapped the screen. Let's start with what we know. A timeline appeared. Joint marital accounts, mortgage payments, household expenses, retirement contributions, normal activity, expected activity. Then another section appeared. The pattern changed immediately. Transfers. Small at first, then larger again. Rachel highlighted several entries. These transactions concern me. Tobias leaned forward. The dates looked familiar. Very familiar. Most occurred before Lauren moved out. Several occurred before the dinner at Canlis. One occurred nearly 2 months before separation. Interesting. Very interesting. What are we looking at? Tobias asked. Rachel zoomed in. Money leaving shared accounts. Legally, that's the question. Elena folded her arms. Keep going. Rachel nodded. Another screen appeared. Destination accounts, receiving institutions, transaction routes. Then something unusual emerged. One receiving account appeared repeatedly. Not a personal account, not a mortgage account, not a standard investment account, a business account. Rachel tapped it. This one. Tobias studied the information. The company name meant nothing to him. Harbor Strategic Solutions, LLC. Never heard of it. Elena hadn't either. Rachel continued. On paper, it's a consulting company. On paper? Elena asked. Rachel nodded. That's the problem. Interesting. Very interesting. The room became quieter. Rachel opened another file. Corporate registration records. Ownership structures. Business addresses. The company existed. Technically, legally, but barely. The registered office was a small suite in Bellevue. The mailing address belonged to a virtual office service. The listed business activity remained vague, extremely vague. Tobias had seen similar structures before. Not illegal, not necessarily, but rarely transparent. Rachel clicked again. Another document appeared. This time, everyone's attention sharpened. The ownership trail, layers of registrations, layers of management, layers of paperwork. Complex enough to discourage casual review, not complex enough to stop a forensic accountant. Rachel pointed toward a name. The room went silent. Cameron Hayes. Not primary owner, not officially, but connected. Indirectly. Documented, traceable. The connection wasn't enormous. It didn't need to be. It existed. That alone mattered. Tobias sat back. The information settled slowly. Not emotionally, structurally. The timeline suddenly looked different. The luxury lifestyle, the expensive travel, the hidden transfers, the aggressive divorce demands. The property searches. Everything aligned more cleanly now. Elena spoke first. How much? Rachel already knew the answer. Directly traceable? Yes. She looked at the screen. Approximately $87,000. Interesting. Very interesting. Not millions. Not enough to attract headlines. Enough to matter in divorce court. Enough to create questions. Enough to damage credibility. Rachel continued. And that's only what we can verify currently. Elena exchanged a glance with Tobias. No excitement, no celebration, just recognition. Facts were arriving. The next 2 hours became increasingly detailed. Rachel walked through transaction histories, expense reimbursements, payment schedules, account movements. Each explanation added another piece, another connection, another confirmation. Eventually, one issue emerged above the others. Timing. Again. Always timing. Many transfers occurred before Lauren filed for divorce, before separation, before disclosure requirements, before transparency. That mattered. A lot. By noon, the picture had become difficult to ignore. Rachel closed several files, then summarized. At minimum, marital funds appear to have been redirected. Knowingly? Tobias asked. Rachel shrugged slightly. I don't evaluate intent. Good answer. Professional answer. Intent belonged to attorneys. And judges. Not accountants. Elena smiled slightly. Another reason she liked Rachel. Facts first. Interpretations later. The meeting ended shortly afterward. Rachel left. The conference room became quieter. Only Tobias and Elena remained. For a moment, neither spoke. The city stretched beyond the glass walls. Cars moved through intersections. People rushed between meetings. Normal life. Completely unaware. Elena finally broke the silence. Well, Tobias nodded. Well, she laughed softly. The good news, what's that? The divorce strategy just changed. Interesting. Very interesting. How? Elena opened her binder. Several pages already contained handwritten notes. Because credibility matters. Tobias listened. When people ask courts for money, credibility matters. Okay? When people hide financial activity, credibility matters. Okay? When timelines stop matching public statements, credibility matters. Tobias understood. The issue wasn't punishment. The issue was trust. Judges made decisions based on credibility, and credibility depended on consistency. Increasingly, Lauren's story lacked consistency. Elena continued. The requests for support payments. The condo. The savings. The retirement accounts. She tapped each section. Everything becomes harder now. Not for Tobias. For Lauren. Interesting. Very interesting. The meeting should have ended there. It almost did. Then Elena's phone rang. She glanced at the screen. Immediately answered. The conversation lasted less than 2 minutes. Yet something changed. Tobias noticed it immediately. Her posture, her attention, the slight narrowing of her eyes, professional focus. When the call ended, she placed the phone down carefully. What happened? Elena looked at him, then smiled. A real smile this time. Small, controlled, but real. That was Nathan Cole. Interesting. Very interesting. What did he want? Elena organized her thoughts before answering. He wanted to confirm something. What? The board meeting. Tobias waited. Elena continued. The board didn't remove Cameron voluntarily. The distinction landed immediately. Meaning, they were given information. Information. The most important currency in the entire story. What kind? I wasn't told. Then how do you know? Because Nathan didn't sound surprised. That answer made Tobias smile. Elena noticed. You understand. Yes. Professionals recognized other professionals. Nathan Cole wasn't investigating possibilities anymore. He was verifying facts. That meant the investigation had advanced. Substantially. The realization lingered. Neither spoke for several seconds. Then Elena asked a question. One Tobias hadn't expected. Do you know what's interesting about all this? He waited. The entire case started because someone thought you were insignificant. The sentence hung in the air, quiet, accurate, uncomfortable. Tobias looked toward the window. Seattle remained gray. Rain moved across the bay. Life continued. Elena wasn't finished. They underestimated you. Not dramatic, not emotional, simply factual. Just another observation, like every other observation. The difference was that this one felt personal, because she was right. Lauren underestimated him. Cameron underestimated him. Several attorneys underestimated him. Several executives underestimated him. They saw an ordinary man, a maintenance technician, a quiet husband, a person easy to dismiss. What they didn't see was discipline, documentation, patience, preparation. The qualities nobody noticed until they mattered. Elena gathered her papers. The meeting was finally over. As they walked toward the elevator, Tobias's phone vibrated. One message, unknown number, no name, no explanation. He opened it. The text contained only a single sentence. You should know Lauren has been trying to contact Cameron for days. He isn't answering. Interesting. Very interesting. Because people usually stopped answering when they had bigger problems to worry about. The hearing took place on a Wednesday morning in King County Superior Court. Seattle greeted the day with low clouds and steady rain. Nothing unusual. Tobias parked 3 blocks away and walked the rest of the distance. He carried a single leather folder. No boxes, no binders, no dramatic displays. Everything that mattered had already been exchanged through discovery. Everything that mattered had already been documented. The courtroom itself looked smaller than most people imagined. Television gave people unrealistic expectations. Real courtrooms were quieter, less theatrical, more procedural. The consequences remained significant. The atmosphere simply wasn't. Tobias arrived 20 minutes early. As always, Elena Brooks arrived 5 minutes later. Professional, calm, prepared. She carried 2 folders and a legal pad, nothing more. You ready? She asked. Tobias nodded. Yes. And he was. Not because he knew exactly what would happen, because he knew exactly what he had. Facts, documentation, consistency. The 3 things that had carried him through the previous several months. The courtroom gradually filled. Attorneys, clerks, families, people dealing with the complicated consequences of human decisions. Lauren arrived shortly before the hearing began. The difference was immediately noticeable. Not physically, emotionally. The polished confidence she wore at Canlis was gone. The certainty she carried during the early stages of the divorce had faded. She looked tired, careful, concerned. Her attorney sat beside her, organized, focused. Yet even from a distance, Tobias could sense something had changed. The aggressive energy from earlier filings had disappeared. Interesting. Very interesting. The judge entered. Everyone stood, then sat. The hearing began. At first, everything felt routine. Procedural matters, property discussions, financial disclosures, timeline reviews, nothing dramatic, nothing surprising. The judge asked questions. Attorneys answered them. Documents were referenced. Records were reviewed. The process moved steadily forward. Then the focus shifted. Toward credibility, toward financial transparency, toward disclosure obligations. The subjects Elena preferred. The subjects Tobias expected. Lauren's attorney spoke first. The argument felt familiar. Lauren's greater income, her professional advancement, her future opportunities, the financial imbalance within the marriage. The narrative had remained largely unchanged. Tobias listened quietly, observing, the same way he observed everything. Eventually, Elena stood. The atmosphere changed slightly, not because she raised her voice. She never did, because preparation has weight, and everyone in the room seemed to recognize she had arrived prepared. Elena began with simple questions. Property ownership, financial transfers, disclosure dates, nothing dramatic, nothing aggressive. The judge followed easily. Lauren's attorney followed too. Then Elena introduced the first timeline. A clean visual summary. Simple, clear, effective. Dates appeared. Transfers appeared. Property discussions appeared. Housing searches appeared. Everything aligned. Everything documented. The judge reviewed the chart carefully. So did Lauren. The change in Lauren's expression was small, but Tobias noticed. Always. Elena continued. Not emotionally, methodically. Every statement connected to documentation, every claim connected to evidence. No speculation, no assumptions, just records. The most damaging moments weren't dramatic. They rarely are. The most damaging moments came when dates refused to cooperate. For example, Lauren claimed major marital decisions happened after separation. The documentation showed preparations before separation. Lauren claimed certain financial movements were routine. The documentation suggested otherwise. Lauren claimed transparency. The records revealed omissions. None of those issues alone would have decided anything. Together, they created a pattern. And patterns mattered. A lot. The judge asked several questions. Lauren answered them. Carefully, respectfully. Yet each answer seemed less certain than the previous one. Because documentation limited flexibility. Facts had a habit of doing that. About halfway through the hearing, Elena introduced the financial analysis completed by Rachel Whitaker. Not every detail, only the relevant parts. The transfers, the timeline, the undisclosed connections, the business account, Harbor Strategic Solutions, LLC. Again, the courtroom remained quiet. No dramatic reactions, no gasps. Real consequences rarely sounded dramatic. They sounded administrative. The judge reviewed the materials for several minutes, then asked additional questions. More answers. More records. More clarification. The process continued. Tobias remained silent throughout most of it. His role was surprisingly small. That wasn't a bad thing. The evidence spoke more clearly than emotions ever could. Eventually, the judge addressed the central requests: spousal support, property division, asset allocation, financial claims, one by one. The decisions arrived. Measured, reasoned, supported by documentation. Lauren's major support request was denied. The rationale appeared straightforward. The evidence did not support her position. Several financial claims were reduced substantially. Certain asset requests were rejected entirely. The condominium remained protected. Retirement allocations remained closer to equal distribution. The aggressive strategy that once seemed inevitable had quietly collapsed. Interesting. Very interesting. Not because Tobias won everything. He didn't. That was never realistic, because the outcome reflected facts rather than narratives. And that mattered. A lot. The hearing concluded shortly afterward. The judge issued final procedural instructions, future filings, administrative requirements, remaining steps. Then everyone stood. The case moved toward conclusion. The courtroom began emptying. People gathered documents. Attorneys exchanged brief comments. Life continued, just as it always did. Tobias organized his folder. Nothing more, nothing less. Then he noticed something. Lauren wasn't leaving. Everyone around her moved. She remained seated, staring at the table, not moving, not speaking. Interesting. Very interesting. Elena noticed, too. "You okay?" she asked quietly. Tobias nodded. "I'm fine." And he was. More than fine, actually. Not triumphant, not vindictive, simply calm. Months earlier, he had walked out of Canlis carrying humiliation. Today, he walked out of court carrying closure. Those were very different things. Outside the courthouse, rain continued falling. Seattle remained gray. Traffic moved through downtown streets. People hurried past without knowing anything about the hearing that had just ended. Tobias appreciated that. Most victories didn't need audiences. Elena walked beside him toward the courthouse steps. The conversation remained practical. Next, filings, final procedures, administrative cleanup. Nothing emotional. Halfway down the steps, Elena stopped. "Tobias." He turned. She nodded toward the entrance. Lauren stood there, alone, watching. Interesting. Very interesting. Because Cameron Hayes was nowhere to be seen. Not at the courthouse, not supporting her, not waiting nearby. Gone. The realization felt significant. Not emotionally. Symbolically. Months earlier, Lauren had walked away from her marriage toward certainty, toward status, toward influence, toward Cameron. Now she stood alone outside a courthouse, and Cameron wasn't there. Elena followed Tobias's gaze. "Looks like she wants to talk." "Probably." Tobias remained silent. Rain collected along the courthouse steps. People passed between them. The distance wasn't large, yet it felt enormous. Months of decisions occupied that space. Months of consequences. Months of reality. Elena adjusted her briefcase. "What do you want to do?" "Good question." "A very good question." Tobias looked toward Lauren again. She still hadn't moved. Still waiting. Still watching. For the first time since the hearing began, uncertainty crossed his thoughts. Not about the court, not about the evidence, not about the outcome, about what came next. Because courtrooms settled legal questions. They rarely settled personal ones. And something told him Lauren hadn't come outside to discuss legal matters. She had come outside for something else. Something much harder. Rain fell steadily across the courthouse plaza. Not heavy, just enough to keep people moving. Attorneys hurried toward parking garages. Court employees crossed the street carrying umbrellas. Traffic rolled through downtown Seattle with its usual indifference. Life continued. It always did. Lauren Griffin stood near the courthouse entrance. Alone. No attorney beside her. No Cameron Hayes. No executive colleagues. No audience. Just Lauren. For several seconds, Tobias watched from the bottom of the courthouse steps. Not because he was uncertain, because observation had become habit. He noticed the details automatically. The slight tension in her shoulders. The way she kept adjusting the strap of her handbag. The way she looked toward him, then away. Then back again. Nervous. Interesting. Very interesting. Months earlier, Lauren hadn't looked nervous, not at Canlis, not during the divorce filing, not when she spoke about ambition. Now, she did. Elena stood beside Tobias, waiting, not advising, not interfering, just waiting. Finally, Tobias nodded. "I'll talk to her." Elena gave a small smile. "Call me if you need anything." "I won't." "I know." Then she left, crossing the street toward her car, leaving Tobias alone. The distance between him and Lauren wasn't large. 20 yards, maybe less. Yet it felt like crossing a much longer distance. Because the space between them wasn't physical. It was built from decisions, from consequences, from choices neither could undo. Tobias approached calmly. Lauren remained where she was. The rain collected on nearby concrete. Cars passed behind them. The city moved around them without noticing. "Hi." Her voice sounded smaller than he remembered. "Hi." Silence followed. Not uncomfortable, just real. For the first time in months, neither had a script. No attorneys, no prepared statements, no legal strategy. Just two people standing in the aftermath of their decisions. Lauren looked away first, toward the street, then back again. "I didn't know if you'd stop." "I wasn't in a hurry." A faint smile appeared, then disappeared. The smile looked sad, not manipulative, not calculated, simply tired. For several moments, she struggled to find words. Tobias let her. People usually arrived at honesty eventually, when silence lasted long enough. Eventually, Lauren spoke. "Do you know what I've been thinking about lately?" Tobias shook his head. "The dinner." Interesting. Very interesting. Of all the places to begin, she chose Canlis, the night everything ended. Or perhaps the night everything became visible. Lauren looked toward the rain. "I replay it sometimes." Tobias said nothing. "You remember what I said?" Not a question. A fact. Yes. The answer came easily. Some sentences stayed with people, not because they were loud, because they were precise. Lauren laughed softly. No humor, just regret. "I wish I could take it back." Interesting. But not important. Tobias understood something Lauren was only beginning to understand. Regret changed feelings. It didn't change history. The difference mattered. A lot. "You can't." Lauren nodded. "I know." Silence returned. The rain continued. Several people passed nearby. Nobody paid attention. Nobody recognized them. The anonymity felt appropriate. Eventually, Lauren asked the question. The real reason she waited outside. The real reason she wanted one final conversation. "Tobias." "Yes." Her eyes met his, for the first time since they started talking. "Did you ever love me?" There it was, not money, not court, not Cameron. Love. The question lingered between them. Tobias considered it carefully. Not because the answer was difficult, because it deserved accuracy. "Yes." Lauren looked down immediately. The response seemed to hurt. Perhaps because it arrived without hesitation. Perhaps because it was true. Tobias continued. "I did." Another pause. "Then why didn't you fight for me?" Interesting. Very interesting. Because people often misunderstood what fighting meant. Lauren wasn't asking about effort. She was asking about pursuit, about desperation, about resistance, about being chased. Tobias understood immediately. The answer came slowly, measured. "I think we mean different things when we say fight." Lauren listened. "I spent years trying to make the marriage work. No anger, no accusation, just truth. I showed up. I paid bills. I kept promises. I adjusted my schedule. I supported your career." The words remained calm, steady, factual, not emotional, because facts carried enough weight on their own. "When you left, the decision was already made." Lauren looked away, again, because she knew he was right. Tobias continued. "I wasn't going to compete." The statement landed heavily, not because it was cruel, because it was honest. "With Cameron." "No." Tobias shook his head. "With your choice." Silence. The city seemed quieter for a moment. Lauren stared toward the wet pavement. The answer clearly wasn't what she wanted, yet it was the answer she received. Eventually she spoke again. I made mistakes. True. I know. I was stupid. Tobias didn't answer. People described their own actions however they wanted. He wasn't interested in assigning labels. Lauren continued. Cameron knew exactly what to say. Interesting. There it was again. The shift. Not responsibility, influence. Not choice, persuasion. A subtle difference, but an important one. He understood ambition. Tobias listened. He understood what I wanted. Again, the same pattern, the same theme, the same attempt to explain. Not necessarily excuse. Explain. Lauren kept talking. The words seemed to arrive faster now, like pressure leaving a damaged pipe. He promised opportunities. He promised connections. He promised a future. Tobias remained quiet, because explanations rarely improved under interruption. Then Lauren made another mistake. A small one, the kind Tobias always noticed. He told me everyone respected him. Interesting. Not loved, not trusted. Respected. Powerful people often confuse those things. Lauren laughed bitterly. Turns out most people were just afraid of him. That statement felt more truthful than anything she had said so far. The conversation drifted toward Cameron, the investigation, the collapse, the consequences. Lauren described board meetings, lawyers, internal reviews, questions, documents, everything spiraling faster than expected. The confidence she once attached to Cameron had vanished completely. What remained was confusion, and disappointment, and embarrassment. Eventually she stopped talking. The silence returned, this time longer, heavier, final. Lauren looked at him, really looked at him. Perhaps for the first time in years, not at his career, not at his salary, not at his truck. At him. I underestimated you. The statement arrived quietly, without defense, without justification, without conditions. Interesting. Very interesting. Because it was probably the most honest thing she had said all afternoon. Tobias nodded once. You did. No cruelty, no satisfaction, just agreement. The truth didn't require decoration. Lauren swallowed hard. Rain continued falling around them. I thought you were small. The word returned. One final time. The same word from Canlis. The same word that started everything. The same word that revealed more about Lauren than it ever revealed about Tobias. Tobias looked toward the street, then back at her. No. The answer was immediate, certain, calm. Lauren blinked. Tobias continued. You thought visibility was size. The statement lingered. Powerful not because it was dramatic, because it was accurate. Cameron looked big. His position looked big. His money looked big. His lifestyle looked big. Lauren said nothing, because there was nothing to argue with. Tobias wasn't insulting Cameron. He wasn't defending himself. He was describing reality. The distinction mattered. Then he added one final sentence. The problem is that appearances don't survive audits. For a second, Lauren stared at him. Then she laughed. Actually laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was true, and because she finally understood. The rain seemed lighter now. Or maybe Tobias simply stopped noticing it. The conversation had reached its natural ending. Nothing else remained. No reconciliation, no reunion, no dramatic goodbye. Just closure. The rare kind. The honest kind. Lauren nodded slowly. I guess this is it. Yes. Another silence. Then she asked softly, Will you ever forgive me? Interesting question. A difficult question, but not as difficult as people imagined. Tobias thought about it, then answered honestly. I already did. Lauren looked stunned. Really? Forgiveness and trust aren't the same thing. The distinction landed. Deeply. She understood immediately. Tobias could see it. And that was enough. He offered a small nod, then turned toward the parking lot. No anger, no triumph, no revenge. Just movement. Forward. Exactly where he belonged. Behind him, Lauren remained standing beneath the gray Seattle sky, watching. Alone. And for the first time since the night she called him, small Tobias walked away without carrying any weight from her choices. He carried only his own future. 6 months after the divorce hearing, Tobias Griffin woke up before sunrise. Not because of stress, not because of deadlines, because he wanted to. That difference mattered. A lot. The house sat on a quiet piece of land outside Tacoma. Nothing extravagant, nothing that would impress strangers. A modest 2-bedroom home with a detached workshop and enough space to breathe. The kind of property most real estate agents would describe as practical. Tobias liked practical. Practical things usually lasted. The morning air felt cold as he stepped onto the back porch carrying a cup of coffee. Mist hovered above the grass. The sky slowly brightened. Somewhere in the distance a train horn echoed. The world felt calm, stable, predictable. For the first time in a long time, Tobias's life no longer revolved around reacting to other people's decisions. That realization still surprised him sometimes. Not because he expected misery, because he hadn't realized how much energy uncertainty consumed until uncertainty disappeared. Inside the workshop, several unfinished furniture projects waited. A restored oak desk, a cedar bookshelf, a walnut dining table commissioned by a local client. Work he genuinely enjoyed. Work that produced visible results. Unlike marriages, unlike investigations, unlike corporate politics. Would either fit correctly or it didn't. The simplicity appealed to him. His consulting business had grown steadily during the previous months. Not explosively, steadily, the way Tobias preferred. Hospitals and healthcare contractors increasingly hired him to review compliance procedures and infrastructure documentation. The irony wasn't lost on him. The same attention to detail people once dismissed now paid remarkably well. Interesting. Very interesting. The phone rang shortly after 9. Frank Delaney, the retired contractor who first introduced Tobias to woodworking. Tobias? Morning, Frank. You working today? Always. Frank laughed. You ever take a day off? Occasionally. That's a lie. Probably true. The conversation lasted only a few minutes. Plans for lunch. A project deadline. Nothing dramatic. Normal life? The kind Tobias once thought was boring. Now he understood its value. Normal life was a privilege. Especially after chaos. Around noon another call arrived. This one from Nathan Cole. The investigator rarely called anymore. That alone made Tobias curious. Nathan. How's Tacoma? Interesting opening. Peaceful? Good. A brief pause followed. Then Nathan continued. I thought you'd want an update. Tobias sat down on a workbench. The smell of sawdust filled the workshop. I'm listening. Nathan's voice remained calm, professional, exactly as always. The civil proceedings concluded. Interesting. Very interesting. The remaining consequences of the North Pacific investigation had been unfolding quietly for months. Most never reached newspapers. Most never became public. That was how many corporate problems ended. Quietly. What happened? Nathan chose his words carefully. The company settled several issues. Expected. Cameron. A longer pause. Then civil penalties. Significant. Yes. Interesting. Very interesting. Not prison, not dramatic collapse. Reality rarely worked that way. Instead, consequences arrived through money, licensing restrictions, professional reputation, future opportunities, the things ambitious people valued most. Nathan continued. Several boards won't touch him now. That mattered. Probably more than headlines ever would. Influence depended on trust, and trust once documented away rarely returned. The call ended shortly afterward. No celebration, no victory speech, just information, facts. The same thing the entire story had been built upon. That afternoon, Tobias drove into Tacoma for supplies. Traffic remained light. The weather cooperated for once. Washington occasionally rewarded patience with sunshine. Today was one of those days. While waiting at a traffic light, he noticed something unexpected. A familiar name on a building directory. Harbor Strategic Solutions. Interesting. Very interesting. The same company name Rachel Whitaker had uncovered months earlier. The company still existed. Technically, though the office appeared empty, the sign remained. The activity didn't. Another reminder. Appearances survived longer than reality. The lesson felt familiar. Later that evening, Tobias returned home. The workshop lights glowed warmly against the darkening sky. The house felt comfortable, lived in. His phone remained mostly quiet these days, exactly how he preferred it. One text from Elena Brooks, a photo of her dog. No legal emergency, no court issue, just a photo. Tobias smiled, then responded with a picture of the completed walnut table. Professional friendships. Unexpected. Valuable. Life had become strangely simple, and Tobias found himself appreciating that more than he expected. Around 8:30 that night, another notification appeared. Voicemail. Unknown number. The area code belonged to Seattle. Interesting. Very interesting. Most unknown numbers were meaningless. Something about this one felt different. Tobias listened. A familiar voice filled the speaker. Lauren. For several seconds he simply listened. Not because he expected anything, because endings deserved attention. Lauren sounded calmer than the last time they spoke. Less desperate, less uncertain, just tired. Tobias. A pause. I don't know if you'll listen to this. Another pause. I guess that's fair. The message continued. No dramatic confession, no request to reconcile, no request for money, no request for another chance. Just reflection. She talked about leaving Seattle, a new job opportunity in Oregon, a smaller role, a quieter life. Interesting. Very interesting. Because it sounded strangely familiar. Then she said something that made Tobias stare out toward the dark yard beyond his window. I spent years chasing people who looked important. Silence followed. Then, I should have paid more attention to character. The statement lingered, not because it changed anything, because it finally sounded honest. Lauren continued. I hope things are good for you. Another pause. They probably are. A faint laugh. Then the final words. Goodbye, Tobias. The message ended. The workshop remained silent. Outside, wind moved gently through the trees. Inside, Tobias sat alone for several moments. Not emotional, not conflicted, simply thoughtful. The voicemail represented something important. Not reconciliation, not redemption. Closure. The real kind. The kind that arrived quietly, without speeches, without dramatic music, without grand gestures. Just acceptance. Tobias looked at the screen. The voicemail waited. Saved, preserved, stored, like every other record, like every other piece of history. Then he pressed delete. One tap, Gone. Not because he hated Lauren, not because he wanted revenge, because he no longer needed it. The distinction mattered. A lot. The future didn't require carrying every piece of the past. Some things could simply end. The phone screen went dark. The workshop remained quiet. The night settled comfortably around him, and for the first time since that dinner at Canlis, Tobias realized something. The story had never been about proving anyone wrong. Not Lauren, not Cameron, not the executives who underestimated him. The story had been about remaining steady while other people revealed themselves. Patience, documentation, discipline, truth. Those things didn't create dramatic victories. They created durable ones. Outside, the stars gradually appeared above Tacoma. Inside, Tobias returned to the walnut table waiting in the workshop. A simple project. A useful project. A real project. Exactly the kind of thing he preferred. And as the sound of sandpaper filled the room, Tobias Griffin continued building a life that no longer needed anyone else's approval. Some people spend years trying to look important. Others spend years becoming dependable. At first glance, the first group usually appears more successful. They have the titles, the confidence, the attention, and the applause. But life has a strange habit of testing people when the audience disappears. When that happens, appearances become less valuable than character. Tobias never won because he was smarter than everyone else. He never won because he got lucky. He never won because he shouted louder. He won because he stayed patient when others became careless. He kept records when others relied on assumptions. He respected facts when others trusted appearances. And when the truth finally mattered, he was ready. Most of us will experience some version of this in our own lives. Maybe not in a courtroom. Maybe not in a divorce. But many people know what it feels like to be underestimated, overlooked, or judged by surface appearances. The challenge is resisting the urge to prove yourself through anger. Real strength often looks much quieter than people expect. I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever been underestimated by someone who later realized they were wrong? Or have you ever learned a difficult lesson about judging someone too quickly? Share your experience in the comments. And if you enjoyed this story, subscribe to the channel. Tomorrow's story is about a man who was written out of a family business by his own brother, only to discover a document nobody knew existed.